Hello and welcome to this quick introduction to our 360-degree feedback reports. This particular report you can see is 16 pages long. I don't intend to cover all 16 pages at this moment, but just to introduce you to some of the key points that we believe are special to our 360. You can see on the first page that this tells you who the reviewee is, and in this case it's just a sample leadership report that's been created just for demonstrative purposes, and when the report was taken and printed. On page 2, you can see that we have the first of our charts, and it tells us how well the person scored overall across the whole report in their first 360, what that score was in their second 360, and we would hope to see some improvement based on actions they've taken from either their interpretation or their coaching from accessing the report. How those scores compare against average for all people who have ever taken this report, and how that compares to the top 10%. If you set your own question database, then these will only refer back to the people who've answered your particular question sets. So if you're working with a large client and they want their own question sets, then people can compare themselves internally to their peers and colleagues. We don't particularly focus too much on this data. Some people, however, do like to understand if they're working for a small company or if they're self-employed, they like to see how well they compare to other groups. But for us, really, we're going to be spending more time looking at the detail within each of the questions. The next thing it shows you is who's participated, and in this particular example you can see that the boss, 4 direct reports, the self, 3 peers, and then 1 senior manager and some friends and family. Now it's important to know that if there are less than 3 people in any peer group, with the exception of boss or self, that their scores will be aggregated into an other score group. So in this particular case, senior manager and friends and family will all be amalgamated, making the report perhaps a little bit less valuable to them than otherwise might be the case. When it comes to the second 360, you can see again the information on who's responded, and it is possible for the people to invite different people for the second 360. The next piece of information we've included on page 3 is how long have the raters known you and how well do they feel they know you. And there's something here about helping to give some credibility to the report for your client. So if they've known these people a long time and that they feel that they really well know them, then they might pay more attention to what's being said. If they haven't known them very long, then your job as the coach is to help them as a client to understand the first impressions being given to these peer groups and what they might do to build on the strengths and development areas identified within the report. Typically, you'd expect people who have known the person a long time to say them well, but there's something in and of itself that tells the client, what if they have known this person, so in the boss's case, 5-6 years perhaps, and then the boss says, I really don't know them very well. What is it that they're either giving or not giving of themselves that can help them to build that relationship with this individual? And then page 4 starts the questions of the particular group. So this is the Team Leadership 360, and this particular section is set with general communication. Again, you can see a graph that will become familiar to you, showing their scores for this particular section in their first 360, second, how they compare against everybody else that's completed it, and how they compare against the top 10%. Again, we're not so interested in the overall numbers here, but particularly what the range of scores is, and that's what this graph shows you. This graph shows you that the respondents for this person have scored somewhere between 1 and 10, so across the entire range. And that shows you that they're not behaving in a consistent way, either within peer groups or across peer groups. And we can explore that in more information on a question-by-question basis. We'd be looking for this range to be as small as possible because all the questions are loaded with positive preconception. So they are positive leadership behaviours, and so you'd want people really to be scoring somewhere from 6, 7 above. In the second 360, for this example, you can see that the scores are consolidated, which would suggest that the person has worked on developing those skills or showing them in a more consistent way with different peer groups. Moving on then, we can see the detail behind that general communication. So you can see the question that's been asked, and then we've got a legend at the top here that shows what the scores mean. So top left is their score for the first 360, and that is compared against how important the peer group felt that particular item was, and that's important for a reason I'll come on to shortly. And then how did they identify and score in the second 360 and alter the importance rating there. We feel that the importance rating is something that many 360s miss out, and we've included it because this helps you understand what your peer groups, what your relationships deem as being important. And there's no point in working with a client to improve something just because it's a low score if actually the peer groups don't think it's an important part of that particular person's job role right now. You may have a different conversation if they're talking about their future and moving into a more strategic or senior position, but for their job right now, people may say that this isn't particularly important to them. And what that allows us to do is not presume a correct approach to leadership, because we don't want to dictate what we think is the correct approach to leadership. This allows their peers to identify the most important factors that the person can then work on. So what you'll see is for each question, you'll see how they were scored in their first 360, how they scored in their second, and you can see that for each rated group. Now, as I said, because of the way that the rated groups were set up on this, or the number of people that answered, actually there's no friends and family or senior manager data because there were less than 3 in each group. So their scores have been amalgamated into other. And you can also see that for the peer group, the second 360 was less than 3, so that also is contained in this number here for other. So you can allow the person to look at this information and see what it says. And the first thing really is actively seeks and listens to or implements ideas from me and my team. This person and their boss believe that that is a very important behaviour. They believe that they are performing it well, but actually the direct reports also believe it's important but aren't being listened to in the way that this person believes that they are doing. And so we might want to explore that a little to understand why. The good news is they're clearly able to do this behaviour. Their boss is seeing it, others are seeing it. And so really it's not about learning a new skill, but learning how they apply the skill they already have into the direct report peer group. And so that's really a good quick win for that individual. So as I say, this is just a quick introduction. I'm not going to go through all of this information, but just to show you how the report information can stack up to help you build a picture with this person for real quick wins and positive gains as a result of undertaking this process. As we move on, you can see the next question about leading by example, similar profile that we've seen about how people have scored, and then followed by the question data underneath and how each peer group has answered it. And again, I'm not going to go into any analysis at this point on this report. And then you'll see that repeats itself for each of the questions as you go through. So we're just going to scroll down to the bottom, and here we go, on page 14 on this one, free text questions. Now the question behind this is, how likely on a score of 1 to 10 are you to recommend me and my work? And that's based on Net Promoter Score principles. So you can see that the person, again, what their score is, what they were second time round, and how that compares to the average. Here you can see the breakdown of that for each of the peer groups. And then finally, in the free texts, what is it that these people say about the individual? So what word or phrase describes them best? What do you think is their greatest achievement? And what do you value most about me? And you can see the different peer groups broken down as to where those comments have come from. There's lots of opportunity for sort of positive reflections here on what this person does really, really well. And then the final one is, what one thing would you encourage them to change or develop? And that gives them all the data that they're looking for to help you to work with them to build their skill set. The final aspects in the report are space for some notes and then some insight into how they might want to go about developing their objectives to work with you as their coach, or to develop themselves independently. So a chance to reflect on how to write good positive objectives, and then a space to capture them so they can come back and revisit at a later 360 or at a later point in their development. So that's it for me. If you've got any questions, feel free to email us at admin@orsus360.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can and have a conversation if you need to help you understand more of the information. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.